All right, everyone, welcome to the Focus to Win podcast. This is episode 5, and here's another exciting episode we have here today, and we're really going to touch on some important topics once again. First and foremost, let's get right into it, Lee. We discussed a few things last night. We had our nightly walk, and we came up with a few great ideas that I feel like everybody should know, and the first one was the concept of time, and we talked about the odds that we are here today.
Sperm count.
Yeah, sperm count. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things we pulled up was a statistic, and it's pretty mind-blowing. It was 1 in 400 quadrillion. That is the odds that you are sitting on this earth today. I mean, how crazy is that?
Better swimmer than Michael Phelps.
Yeah, I know, right? I maybe I'm a little more athletic than I thought. Right. But that statistic in itself was pretty mind-blowing, and it led to me to realize that, wow, like this is really special that we have this opportunity on this earth. Mm-hmm. Whatever happens on the other side, it is what it is, but at least we know we have this time. And we touched on a few things, and one of them specifically was gratitude. So one of the things that you always told me growing up was the window pane and the mirror. So why don't you tell everybody more about that?
So I'm trying to think where I heard it originally, but I remember so many people chase what's out the window that other people have, what the Joneses have and all that other stuff. The Joneses are ready for bankruptcy, but you're still chasing them. You don't know what you want. Versus looking in the mirror and finding out what's the most important thing to you.
Right.
And when that really hit me, is like, all right, let's focus on what you want, not what everybody else wants for you. And I'm thankful that I did probably, 12 to 15 years ago, change mindset. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it starts with our mindset of what are we going after, but think of what's in the mirror that you want, not what everybody else wants for you, or, oh, this person has this nice shiny object, I'm going to go chase that. I think about investment properties when it comes to that type of thing too, because there's different philosophies with that.
Right.
You had a lot of conversations of, is it a shorter term, longer term? How long do you finance it? Stuff of that sort. But it's, again, what's important to you. What do you want? Like, I knew I was in my 40s. I knew I'm going to be, when I'm in my 50s, I want some of these things paid off quickly. So I would do 10-year mortgages, not 15, 20, or 30-year mortgages. So again, what's important to you, not what does everybody else have that you're going to go chase.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think it's easier to say that, but you're a good example that you've done it. So, me being about 24 now, they're turning 25, I see it a lot more now at my age where, kids start to make a little bit of money and they start blowing it on jewelry or cars and stuff like that. So how do you almost condition your mind? Because it gets tempting. I'll believe there's times in my life where I'm like, man, I want to get the nice watch, mm-hmm. The piece of jewelry, but there's that discipline and it's almost like you got to teach yourself. So where'd you learn that?
So thankfully I really appreciate my dad and my mom both. I mean, thankfully great parents, but my dad taught me really good work ethics and how to make money, but not how to save it.
Yeah.
So my first 38 years of my life, probably pretty much, I learned how to make it, but I spent the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a lot left. My mom was more a little bit of the saver side, more secure, and then just, pretty methodical into things and the patterns that she had. So I listened to some of that, but I also had to go out and seek other knowledge of like, hey, what is the best way for me to figure out how to save? Because I figured out how to make it, but I didn't figure out how to keep it.
Right.
And it's great on making it, but then you're listening to, I think of Darren Hardy with the compound effect. I think of Dave Ramsey with Financial Peace University. That's some of the two big ones. So it's these small tweaks. When I first started buying investment properties, I was like, what's it worth today? What's it worth tomorrow? What's it worth the next day? Rather than now I buy it as like, all right, what's it worth 5, 10, 30 years down the road?
Right.
And I plan on keeping these long term. So what is that, off put to me? So I'm getting my mailbox money, right? That's
right.
what I think of worse in the beginning. I was like, all right, what about if I sell it tomorrow? I'm like, well, you're going to pay all that tax on it.
Right.
It's great to do some flip properties, but really wealthy people think of when they buy it and then what's your exit strategy. And when is that? Is that 30 years? Is there ever an
10,
exit?
yeah, whatever.
Like, hey, when you bury me, that's the exit. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would say, and then paying it off as fast as possible. Some say, hey, just pay cash, but I don't think, cash on cash return today's market because of higher interest rates, maybe a little bit more that avenue, but just think of what's most important to you. And I think that's one of the biggest things, that slow down and really think through this. What does that look like on paper? Make sure that it does make sense to buy it. First of all, make sure it cash flows and those type things. So didn't want to get so much on the investment side, but that's where things start.
Right. But that's where it ties in, because what people don't understand is that is a very delayed gratification perspective, and it's for yourself. And people are buying these golden shiny objects because I think the perspective is off. They're going for what everybody else wants to view them as.
That we're consumption society. We were talking about last night.
Yep.
Like, all right, people buy all this stuff. Go look in your closets, go look in your basement, your storage area, or wherever you have things, and you're like, holy crap, I bought all this stuff.
Right.
Right. And at the time, you think it's going to make you feel better.
Right.
Whether it be a car, a house, jewelry, whatever it may be, you buy it and then you're like, oh shit, what did I do?
Right.
Because it wears off pretty fast.
Right. And that's where the allocation of time comes in, because once you buy it, it's such an instant impulse.
Yeah.
Right. And where value comes in with time is buying these investments that over time will eventually pay the larger dividends. Right. And that's where even the gratitude comes in, because when you're grateful for what you have and you're not worried about these shiny things,
Yep.
better things in the long term will start to arise. And that's a prime example, like the investment properties or investing in whatever you decide to invest in. That's where you got to just almost push these people aside and say, I'm happy with where I'm at and I'm going to grind and eventually get to the point where I don't have to worry about it.
You're talking about age. So I think of when I first started working and so forth. And then when you start ramping up and you get better, it's like, all right, you're 25, right?
Right.
Your biggest commodity is time. You have more, you should have more of it, right?
Right.
All of us are limited. We're all going to die at some day.
Right.
But at 25, you have much more time than I have at 50.
Right.
So what are you going to do at that time? So I used to work 3 jobs and go to college and so forth. But and then I worked it into, when I get into real estate, I'd work 70 to 80 hour weeks versus a lot of people that work 20 to 40 hour weeks. So if I'm working 2 to 3 times as many hours, now when I'm making that money, I'm putting aside and investing it. And I'm not telling everybody to go work 80 hours, but because of your age, you can work a lot more. You still got plenty of time to go play and do the things you want. Just be smarter with it. And then the money you're making, don't go just piss it away.
I agree.
I went through all that. I learned my lessons, but with my son, I told him in the beginning, I was like, hey, you're saving me. Like, make sure you save. So when you could go buy your first house and you're 25 years old, you could buy it. You could refinance it to a 15-year mortgage the following year. Then all of a sudden you're paying $200 more every month, and now all of a sudden less than 5 years later you have over $100,000 in equity because some of it was a change in the market, but of course it went up even higher than that. But if you wouldn't have done those small tweaks over time, rather than just like
completely different position.
I'm going to go buy that brand new truck right now. I'm like, I'm glad you waited a few years before you did. But just the mindset, because we think the gratification of going and buying these things is going to make us feel so much warmer, warm and fuzzy and more accomplished and all that. It's like you actually feel better over time when you start building your accounts. Right. That gives you more security. The security feels so much better than it does having all the junk in the closet.
Right, and that's where you have the wisdom that I don't. Just because like we mentioned, you're here on this earth and you're finite, so you have to leverage the time as much as possible. And the issue is people they don't have that self-gratitude. They don't have the value of, hey, I'm going to appreciate what I have now. I don't need the shiny things right now. I'm going to do certain things that will allow me to be able to leverage my time and leverage time from an investment perspective. Because stocks and real estate, over time, they always usually go up, right? So that's what I feel like my age struggles with the most, and it's very easy to, and a lot of them don't realize it till it's too late. So that's the big key thing of that.
I've been going back and listening to the Compound Effect audiobook again, and it was talking about his assistant. So he said, hey, I only make $40,000 a year. I don't have, you're talking about saving 10%. And she's like, I don't have any. He said, all right, let's go back and let's look at what you're paying for things. Let's cut some of these subscriptions out. Rather than you buying lunch at the deli every day, let's, bring food in. Let's prep your meals, because then you're going to eat healthier. You're going to spend less money. Coffee. Hey, let's get pods. We'll get them at the office. You can make coffee when you get here. It's going to save you money again. Then all of a sudden she saved, it started like 2%, 3%. Then it was up to 10%. Now all of a sudden, what are you doing strategically different with work? Because once you start changing mindset, hey, I made these small tweaks, I'm feeling better, blah, blah, blah. Now I have a little bit more energy. I'm going to make a few more calls. I'm going to set a few more appointments. And now all of a sudden I'm better because I'm working on myself. Now I know more of what to say, and I can get better on my craft. The better you get on your craft, now all of a sudden you make a little bit more money again. You make a little bit more money. And it's not just about money. Gives you freedom. Like we're talking about money, it's a gratification thing, but it's also the freedom part where a lot of people don't realize, hey, money you're exchanging for time. After a while, you want that investment that you have to be able to give you more free time.
Right.
So that's where I'm at in my life. I was like, all right, I'm able to travel and do some things that I want. Thankfully, you know, my wife has some health issues and so forth, but we're able to go, hey, let's go get away. Let's go away for a week here. Let's go do this. We have that ability because I made all the sacrifices after I was 38 and, you know, it was worth nothing to where I'm at now. It took me later in life. I'm telling anybody young, listen to these things, save like no tomorrow. When you all of a sudden, you know, do you reward yourself? Set small accomplishments, meaning like I had a business coach, and at the end of every month, he's like, all right, if you hit your goals, what's your $100, $200 reward that you give? I was like, oh, I'd like to get a massage. Right. Well, all of a sudden, I still wasn't. I'd hit the goals, but then I was like, say, I'd be busy. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll catch up, and then all of a sudden, I owe myself like 4 or 5 massages. But you still want to reward yourself in some way. But if you know you're doing these things to get to these accomplishments, amazing what can come out of it.
Yeah, and it all goes back to leveraging time. I think everybody has it all twisted in the head where you got to have everything now. And in our society today, it's even worse. And we also touched on another thing last night of doing it for your future self. So, right, when we started on that and we discussed the odds that were here and tied it into, okay, how do we leverage time, which is what you mentioned earlier with the investments and those things. And it starts with the perspective of what I want to look like in a few years. What only in 10 years, 5 years. I always look at my 10-year older self. So if I'm 34 going on 35, what do I want to look like? How do I want to dress? What does my family look like? You know, am I in shape? Those things, it starts with a vision and purpose, which is what we touched on. And then a lot of kids my age are looking for that purpose.
Yep.
So how does a guy my age or a girl my age, how do they figure that out?
I think some of it, like, you have to take time and think, right? There's all these thinking books. Think and Grow Rich is one of the most popular older Napoleon Hill book. But when you start thinking and you start mind mapping or business planning out, you know, me and you talked several times, like, as soon as you started here, it's like, what do you want 5 years from now? And sometimes you have to think 10 years out and then start backing it down. But when you start thinking farther out, now all of a sudden you think of what you can accomplish, because you always underestimate what you can do, or you overestimate what you can do in 1 year, right? Oh, I'm going to get all these things done, and you don't get them done. But over 10 years or over 5 years, all of a sudden I'm going to get these things done. You end up getting way more done than you thought. You underestimate that, but you overestimate 1 year, underestimate that 5 and 10 year. When you start writing stuff down and have something, a target that your mind, because you're focusing your mind of what I'm going after. And then when you start doing things, all of a sudden you see like, holy crap, I said I was going to do that 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden I got it done in 1. Or, hey, I said I'm going to do this in 5, and now in 3 years I accomplished these goals of like paying off a house, or, you know, buying a vacation home, or whatever it may be, and spending the time with your family that you can enjoy.
Right.
You know, like when my dad passed, one of my things was to take care of my mom, make sure she was taken care of, make sure my goddaughter was taken care of. So what do I have to do? So it was on my business plan for 2 or 3 years, well, 2 years at least, that, hey, I wanted to buy my mom a house. I wanted to get her close to me. I needed to get her in a rancher. Her mom's still alive. She's 97. My grandmother is. So we need to get her on one floor. She wasn't in a townhouse. So that was one of my goals, right? And then all of a sudden you start achieving it, rather than you just go buy a bunch of crap on Amazon. Amazon's like, you can't, you go in any neighborhood now without like at least one Amazon truck in the neighborhood.
It's ridiculous. And well, you touched on a good point about writing things down. And a lot of people that are probably my age, or even honestly, even your age too, they're probably in a stage, most of them, that don't have purpose or fulfillment in some sort of way. So what would you say? Like, what do they write down? So are they going to get like a blank slate of paper and just say, hey, I want to do this? And how would you tell them to do it?
So you got to figure out what's important. Again, mirror. What is it that you want in your life? What do you want your life to look like? You had mentioned about, you know, your 35-year-old self.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of it now at 50. I'm like, all right, I'm in better shape than I was at 35 and 40 years old.
Yeah.
I work a lot harder at it, but I'm putting my focus time towards it. So I think that you just have to look at, like, sometimes you're looking at magazines, sometimes you're watching TV, but don't go chase that one thing. You have to sit there and see these things, but also figure out what you feel is important. Meaning, I think of my goddaughter now. She's 17. All right, you want to work in daycare system. Like, hey, do you want to work with kids and so forth? What does that look like? Start there. you don't know exactly what it's going to expand into till you start it. You might love it, you may hate it, you may end up in the medical field after that.
Right.
You have to take one step at a time. I think of my daughter with, she knew she wanted to get into nursing. All right, great. What does that look like? Just be the best that you can at it. Don't go in and say, I'm going to just do whatever it takes to get by.
Right.
Because that's where you get nothing in your life.
Yeah.
You're going to chase the paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And so many people do that. I was like, guys, it only takes a little bit more.
Right.
That 1% more, a little one. If you did focus on getting 1% more every day, just better with your time.
I would take that any day of the week. It's like that penny. If I give you $5 million or a penny that doubles every single day or year, I would take the penny any day of the week, because the results will compound. And like anybody who's watching, listen, you need to read the compound effect. All this will make sense or be a lot more clear, just because it's going to go in more depth on that concept. And your future, the main reason we're all doing this is so that we can make our future self proud. Some realize it, some don't. Yeah. Some will never actually realize their purpose because they don't focus on it.
And parents, grandparents, you just went through that. Sorry for your loss. I mean, you just lost
appreciate
your
that. Yeah.
But think of some of those conversations. So let's touch on some of them. You had some powerful conversations with your grandfather, right?
Yes. So obviously my grandfather unfortunately passed away. Rest in peace, Pop. Love you. And one of the last conversations we had, I recorded it. It was probably a 10 to 15 minute conversation.
Which I didn't know was recorded, which was really good, because that way he was at peace talking.
Correct. And that all started because it was awareness. I had the awareness of time, and I understood time was slim. And he was in the hospital, and he told me it was funny when he said it, but it was so valuable. And it was, if you're looking back, you're never going to move forward. And he says, if you're looking back and moving forward, you're going to run into a lot more shit than you should. Right. So, but what he was getting at me is that if we live our life on just doing just impulse things that made us feel good and comfortable in that moment, you'll never be able to really take that next step. Or if you're so focused on these past negative things that has happened to you, you can never take that next strive. And until you look forward and you say, where do I want to go? What do I look like? And what is my purpose? And what's going to make me happy? None of this will matter. And I think the reason why you have attained a lot of these smart, from a money perspective, from a life perspective, successes, is because you realize you had a vision. I want to be this. And I want to attain this. I want to be a great grandfather, a great father. I want to make a lot of money and provide for my mom and my grandmother, or your grandmother, and all these things. And that's what happened, because your purpose was much larger than I want to impress people. Yeah. And you realized that life was so much valuable, more than buying the Rolex, buying the Ferrari, buying all those things.
Yeah. So I think of my dad too when he retired. So I've seen him lose so much purpose. He was sleeping until noon, 1 o'clock, and he said, I'm worthless, blah, blah, blah. And he's he's probably in his 70s, mid 70s by then. And I'm watching this. I'm like, holy crap. And I'm more in a segment of my life where I'm like working like crazy of getting achieving things, getting the awards, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I'm watching, I was like, what do you want to do? I said, and we had some deep conversations, and it came back to him basically working again. I was just talking to a doctor that I'm dealing with now. And he's like, I'm not going to retire. He's like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I don't have anything that's going to consume my time that's going to give me purpose. So here this is late 60s, early 70-year-old person. It's very educated, very smart, but we all need to have purpose. So you have to figure out what your purpose looks like. And it changes over time too. Yeah. So it's not like, oh, I'm going just at this. This is the only thing I'm going to look at. I'm like, no, there's going to be other things that come. You're going to have all the small purposes, but what is your biggest thing that's going to drive you? Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes back to what when you start looking back. So the only time you really want to look back is, what am I grateful for? Where did I have some really good accomplishments that I'm grateful for? Grateful for my family, grateful for these small things, grateful for the time with grandkids, grateful for the time with kids, grateful for time with my mom. It's like, so a lot of these things, I think of your mornings where you get to spend time with your grandfather.
It's irreplaceable. Right? You couldn't give me an amount of money for that. But that's a great point. If you notice, all those things you listed were not self-interest. It had no self-interest. It had nothing to do with, I want this. It was, I want to do this, but it's for everybody else. It's for a bigger reason than what you're here. Because at the end of the day, when I gave a speech to my grandfather, one of the things that he always felt was that he didn't do enough. And I looked at him, I looked over that casket, and I said, I'm going to pick it up where you left it, and I'm going to drop it off better than what it was. And part of that is understanding that he did so many things and went out of his way to make sure all of us were taken care of.
Yeah.
And I think when it's all said and done and our time is up and, God's ringing our bell, we have to realize that, did I leave it better than I found it? And that's so important.
Philosophy of people is like, I always want to leave them better than I found them, right?
Yep.
Going back, I lost my train of thought of one of the things I did want to hit on my old age.
Well, one of the things that we did mention was the gratitude versus greed, and that's a conflicting thing because as you could tell, we're talking about obviously your future self and wanting to attain a lot of stuff, but then we're also talking about the value of where we are at, and
sacrifices to get there.
Right.
So that's what I'd say. Just be careful of the sacrifices you have to make to get, and don't become greedy, and then the greed sucks you in, and hey, I got these things and these material items, and then you have no family to be able to enjoy it with, or the partner in life,
right?
Of like, what does that look like?
Yeah,
that looks like a pretty unfulfilled life,
right?
So then you're lacking purpose again.
Yep.
So what's the purpose? If the purpose is just dollars and cents, you're not going to have enough enjoyment. You're not going to be happy. How many billionaires are out there that don't live a happy life and they have everything that they could possibly buy?
Right.
But it's like, you have to have enjoyment and you have to figure out your purpose. And until you dig a little bit inside, this is all self-reflection of what is it that's like drives me purposefully. And for me, it's helping others now more than anything else.
Yeah.
So, and I see a lot of I listen to a lot of Ed My Life podcasts. Right?
Yep.
And he has enough money, he doesn't have to work again. But he's willing to always give back, and that's where, when you give, amazing what you get back.
Yeah.
Right. You get the fulfillment. You're getting fulfillment. You're not getting, and sometimes it's dollars and cents, but that's not the reason you're giving. I think of givers and takers out there. That's what I was going to say earlier. In life, when you have the ones, you have family members, you have givers and takers, right? Who makes you feel better? That taker is a battery drainer.
Yeah.
Versus a battery charger that's going to make you feel better, build you up. So think, do you want to be in life? Do you want to be a battery charger, a battery drainer? And are you going to be that taker that you're going to be empty inside for taking all the time? Versus when you give and you constantly give, amazing what your life looks like.
Yeah.
Because that purpose, that gives it so much purpose. So like, all right, if you could help just one person, amazing what that comes out of. I mean, the main reason we do this is to try to help other people. If only one person watched it and they had got something out of it and made their life better, that's a huge win.
Yep. I take that, if I, anytime I go to a seminar, if I could learn one thing, that's great. So if I'm looking at it from a speaker perspective and I'm speaking in front of a bunch of people, if I can give one person one thing that changes someone's life because of the value of life and how special all of our experiences are, that's worth way more than any money can buy. And, but we talked about also like a producer and a consumer and how it ties into gratitude versus greed. Producers are givers. They are people who produce things for the better and well-being of the world. That's what an entrepreneur is really all about. They provide solutions for people to make their life better. And then you have consumers, which is, like you said, the battery drainers. And these are the people that are, like we mentioned earlier, buying all the shiny objects. They're doing all these things, and it's so funny how it's so close together of all these people who buy these shiny objects. Like you mentioned, these billionaires that could buy anything, they probably did, and realized this is not what I thought it was. And there's a void that they must.
Well, it's funny how people look at things too. I think of, I drive my wife's, we drive an old van that we drive to the airport and different places. Because like, all right, I don't want a newer vehicle that's going to get banged up, first of all. And so what? Like, I don't really care, but you can see sometimes when I pull in here, like, oh, what is that?
Right.
Not a big freaking deal. So don't get caught up in small things. It's more about, sometimes it's just what's practical to get things to what you really want to get to.
Yeah.
So
and that's a good point, because I want nice things in life. Like, I want a nice house when I'm older. I want to have a nice family. I want to have nice vacations. So when I'm looking at that, I'm like, there's also that side where I want more than what I have. Like, there shouldn't be a limit on that, but there's also, if I don't get it and I die tomorrow, am I going to be happy with? And I would agree that yes, I would be, just because even though I have stuff I want to fulfill, whether I attain it or not, I'm able to say I've had these experiences with these people. I've been loved and I've given love, and that's really the only thing that really will sit in your heart. You could have everything in this world, but if you don't have love within your heart, and like you said, you're driving that car and you may have people that probably say stuff, but who cares?
Right.
You know what you're worth. You know everything else is so much more important.
But it's funny when you see it and people judge because they're too busy looking in the window pane of what other people have rather than be like, hey, well, that's different. Like, no big deal. The other thing was the finite amount of time that we have, right? Mm-hmm. So we talked about, your first 20 years, you're spending so much time in school and educating and so forth. And then your next 10 years, maybe you're starting a career, maybe you're in some kind of business, you're trying to find what career you want to go into. Now you're 30, now 30 to 40. Sometimes you're fixing what you screwed up in the 20s to 30s or your family, stuff of that sort. And then when you get into your 40s, your prime money making years are typically 40 to 55. Not for everybody, but you look at athletes, it's well before that. They're way past that. But Aaron Rodgers at 39. I think of different ones. And then you get 55 plus. Now you're getting towards the golden years of where's retirement, what does that look like, and so forth. And then when you get now that's 60 to 70, and then you get 70 to 90. Hey. And we need to be able to make sure we're funding our whole life now because a lot of people are, most people are living longer. So you think of those segments of life, and if you're not looking at it at 5 to 10 year segments, you're missing out.
Yeah.
You're not going to prepare. You're not going to plan enough for later in life. So when you do get older, the government's not always going to take care of you. Or if they do, it's not going to be a great quality.
Right.
So what do you want that to look like?
Yeah.
So especially if you're 20 something, start saving now, because we were talking about the compound effect of amazing how much money starts compounding over time. If you started saving money at 23, even if it's like $250 a month, versus when you start saving at 35 or 40, you're going at 23 doing that consistently is going to save way more than somebody starting later in life.
Right. You got to put time in your favor at the end of the day. And we discussed this too, where it was like so many people have an idea on what they want to do. So now we're shifting from the person that doesn't have any idea what they want to do, or the person that is doing what they want to do, but they're just making bad decisions and not leveraging their time accordingly. But then you have the people who are like in it, but then they're not committing with action.
Right.
They think about, I like the idea of doing this. Like, I want to get into marketing. I want to get into photography, whatever it is. But so many people think about it and never do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, the best time to do it is now.
Yeah.
You want to do the diet? Oh, I'll wait next week.
Very
No.
best time was 20 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Like they say about planting a tree. When was the best time? 20 years ago.
Right.
When's the next best? Today.
Right. Correct. And that's exactly right. Because the problem is so many people get caught up in, I will do it, I'll push it to the side, and usually never gets done.
Tomorrow.
And you just wasted time. Your time's finite. There is no guarantee. There is no tomorrow, is what Apollo Creed says in Rocky. There is no tomorrow. There's nothing guaranteed.
You lived your life thinking that way. It's just like when you go on vacation. Amazing what you can do the day before you go on vacation.
Right.
You can get a ton of shit done.
Right.
But a lot of people live their life as, I'm going to do it tomorrow or the next day, or hey, I'll get to it next week. What happens if it doesn't come?
Right.
That's that's part of what our purpose was of talking about this, is like gratitude. What's your purpose? Stop spending stupid money on one stupid thing, because you're going to need it when you are older. We hope that you live a good quality, long life. Mm-hmm. But what does that life look like when you're older? And if you don't start thinking about it young, you're going to have a hell of a time when you get older.
Right.
And I wish I had someone I wish I was listening to something like this when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I probably would have saved a whole hell of a lot more, not wasted as much money on
I feel like everybody as they get older will say the same thing. There's always more that you could have done.
I wish I could have.
But if you broke all this down into, not only from an investment perspective, leveraging your time with your money, leveraging your time and understanding that it's not guaranteed, the awareness really comes into play is that if I didn't wake up tomorrow or like we talked about the $10 million, if someone gave you $10 million, you would still deny it to wake up. If you understood that tomorrow is not guaranteed and there was a 50-50 chance you wake up, I guarantee you're going to do everything you can to get it done. And if you live your life on that foundation, even though you may not be perfect, you're going to get a lot more done than you should have, and you're going to reach heights that you didn't realize that you could have attained.
Agree.
And that's where it really breaks down. I think that's gratitude, though. That's really all it really is understanding that it's not guaranteed. I'm happy. I'm going to be fulfilled. Not everything's going to go my way. I'm going to be in the shitter sometimes. You're going to go through hard times.
100%.
But it could always be a lot worse.
Well, the more things that you have going in your direction, the more problems you're going to have. Because people pray for less problems all the time. Like, they're going to come, and they're going to be bigger problems and bigger.
Right.
So if you think you're going to work through life to have more in your life and better quality of life, there's always going to be problems. And
Right.
like I said, they typically get bigger over time. So just watch what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
So, and just know that it's coming. And if you're wishing for less problems, you could probably have a really small life.
Yeah. I agree. I think, so many people pray for what they don't have. They don't pray for what they do have.
Yeah.
And that's where the gratitude and greed balance, it's a very difficult balance, because you have the side that is, you have it really good, but then there's that, you shouldn't be satisfied with this, because like you mentioned, I try to pick things up and drop them better than I found them.
Yeah.
If you're able to have that good balance of saying, all right, if stuff doesn't work my way, I don't need to show off for everybody. I don't need to do those things. I just want to make myself fulfilled and make sure the people around me that I love and care about are going to be better. And that's what it's all about.
Think of like, you hear these rags to riches stories and stuff. Anything can change at any time. If it's not going the way you want it to go, make some small tweaks. Amazing what will happen when you set your mind to something and then set some goals towards it, set an action plan, and go after and take action.
Right.
You take the action, amazing what comes out of it.
Right.
Every business that I've done, like any business I can think of, doesn't matter where it is. People are like, oh, there's not much opportunity. There's so much opportunity in the world,
Especially today. My God.
Right, there's so many jobs. Like every business owner I talk to is looking for somebody that's willing to work and put a little extra in. Like, there's not many people that I know like, oh, I got more than enough employees right now. I don't know many of them that are saying that. I know so many of them that can't find good help that will take and do a little extra.
Absolutely.
Like just think of customer service in today's industry across the board. Or not just industry, but I'm just restaurants too.
Right.
Going to a store.
It doesn't matter. There's
just do a little more. Don't expect when you do that little more. Don't expect you're going to get a reward. Mm-hmm. But if you keep doing those small tweaks, all of a sudden your life looks better.
Right.
Because you're going to get recognition for it. You're going to get more money from it. You're going to get more. You're from giving. You're going to naturally get.
Right. Yeah. And real estate is a great representation of helping people, but also you have a lot of real estate agents, and just in general, they're so focused on the commission and making the money and not helping somebody.
Right.
And what you've done a great job of, and what I've noticed is that all your clients, all these people that know you, and I don't genuinely think anybody said anything bad about you. I don't really care what anybody says. You've handled your business in a very ethical manner, and you went approaching it, I just want to help somebody.
Yeah.
And one of the recent sales that I had, it was a older couple. They were retiring, and they're retiring and living the rest of their life. And what fulfilled me was not, oh, I sold a nice house that they've had for years. It was to see her smile, saying like,
I've seen that picture.
yeah, she was the happiest woman just to see me.
Yeah.
And every time I went over to her and I would drive to their new house, she'd always be the happiest person. And I love that about her. And she always gave me a little more energy. Yeah. So when I left that conversation, and I left the last time I saw her when she was signing paperwork, whether, that may be the last time I ever see her, I don't know. But at least I know that I impact her in a positive way. And I can leave with a smile knowing I did that.
I can say in this business, it's one of the things I love, because you have a bank account, right?
Yep.
And you can see that fluctuate. But that's your emotional bank account that people don't think of. And I was like, getting your emotional fill is super important in purpose of life.
Yep.
That when you see it and then you see those people, you just get so energized from it. And you want to go help somebody else.
Yeah.
Just from like, oh, I'd love to find another client like that I can help, because you're trying to get them to achieve their goals, right?
Right.
It wasn't your goal. It was like,
No.
oh yeah, I'll sell another house. That's not what it is. But when you're helping them, getting them into like, hey, getting on to retirement, or getting like, as we go through these chapters in life, when you're helping them achieve it, it's like, holy crap, you come back and you're like, I wish I could bottle it up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, I could take a little bit of that today. I'll take a drink.
Right.
But the emotional bank account, amazing what comes out of that.
Yeah, no one's going to remember you by, oh, he made a lot of money or he did that. They're going to remember you by, I remember there was one time he did this and he made me laugh, or he made me smile. He made me the happiest person in the world that moment. And if you're just able to make someone smile, that should be something people don't realize that. To make someone smile, it's the greatest feeling in the world.
Sometimes it's even like just walk in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Walk in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Try to get somebody to smile, because some people are like grouchy as can be, like, hey, how are you? And they ignore you. I'm like, hey, did you have a good day? Like all of a sudden they finally smile, like either leave me the hell alone or
Right.
like, what do you want? I'm like, I just wanted to say hi.
Right. Well, then you got the other side of, in real estate, you got the clients that are a pain in the ass, and they're anytime you're with them, they're just draining your energy. They're probably, super negative, whatever it is. And
That's anybody.
yeah, and they're consumers. They don't have the recognition of gratitude, and it's hard to do that when you do have gratitude, because you'll start to realize that some people just don't value that as much. They don't value the moment that we're in, and I think stuff like death and, unfortunately, like loss in life, it will teach you that a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to forget. You shouldn't forget the fact that it is, you got a 1 in 400 quadrillion chance of hitting, and it's, for some people it's more, so where's
Right.
But
Like hitting the lottery, 10 times or something? I don't know, something
it was like that. It was like over 2 times. It was like winning the lottery in 2 times in your lifetime. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Just as a recap, I just think of like gratitude, short window of life.
Yep.
Think of what's important to you. Look at the window pane. I look at the mirror more than looking out the window pane. Just these small things in life. Hopefully you guys take something great out of this and it helps you move forward. Give. Just amazing what happens when you give. And I'm not talking about money. Just give your time to somebody. Give a smile. Give some acknowledgments. Give some kudos. This is spouses, anything else. It's like amazing what comes out of that. When you start writing out, I started doing a gratitude journal. Amazing. Like, you can't have a bad day when you're writing down what you're grateful for. And it could be the smallest thing.
I love that. I'm gonna have to start doing that. Holy crap! So I'm gonna implement that. I'll make a promise to you that instead of my journal talking about what's on my mind, I'm gonna have a gratitude journal.
Just 3 small things.
Boom.
It could have been like, hey, I had a great meal. My mom made this great meal. Hey, I ran into this person, had a great conversation with so-and-so. Or it could be something big, like, oh my God, I hit my goals today. I did all my calls and I got an appointment. Whatever it may be, but it's small accomplishments. Then you're grateful. All of a sudden, you can't have a bad day.
That's very true. That's a good point. I love that. That's where we're going to close off, because that was just bars that you just feel right there. But Lee, I appreciate, obviously we had a great talk last night, and I feel like all these things really ties into the gratitude, and realizing that, number one, time is very limited, so take advantage of it and just live your life and make people smile, and do it in the right way.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes
The
down
other thing
to.
is, one simple thing, take care of yourself. Like, we went out, went for a walk. Like, we were, hey, we're going to have a conversation. And we walked for 4.3 miles.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, good. But these small things, get your body moving, the endorphin release, amazing. Like, hey, I can't think. Well, like, you start moving your body, your endorphin release, amazing what comes out of that. So hopefully you take something small out of there. So have a great one, guys.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you.